Today, I'm going to be speaking with a very good friend of mine, and we're actually going to be doing monthly lives. So every Wednesday, once a month, Michelle and I are going to be jumping on, and we're going to be giving you guys so many amazing skill sets and tools, whether you're a coach or whether you're just someone trying to learn more about yourself and improve your relationship with yourself. We are going to be helping you do that. So welcome. We have Michelle here.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning. I'm so glad you guys can hear me this morning. So a bit of an introduction, something that Michelle and I talk about often and that we teach our clients is around how do we choose discipline, how to build discipline actually. How do we actually build discipline and not just choose it? How do we build it into the system so that it's something that is actually becomes habitual? And I think this morning is going to do a really great job of kind of breaking it down. And we're so lucky to have Michelle here. So Michelle is a client of mine, but also she is one of my greatest teachers. I've been learning from Michelle for about 8 years now. She is the owner of the Neuroscience of Coaching. She coaches on how to build skill sets, on improving their coaching with their clients. And I've been able to learn from her firsthand for many years. And this is the same systems that we coach in Flex Methods. So very exciting to have Michelle here coaching all of us and having this amazing conversation. Michelle, is there anything that you want to share before we kind of jump into this morning's live?
Well, first, I'm always so happy to be here, Hattie, and I really appreciate the work that you do behind the scenes, all the work that you're doing with your clients. As your client for many years, I can attest to the amount of work that you're putting in, how much you care about your clients. And even before we explore everything that we're going to today, the number one theme is always going to be relational feedback, a safe coach, a safe teacher, a safe space. That is the thing that fuses everything together. So we're going to break down this idea of what discipline is, because the fitness industry, and I know there's limitations with social media and mindset mantras are really cool and really catchy, but most of the time we're missing the nuance and the applied behaviors to actually build certain things. So a lot of the time we've heard this piece around choosing discipline over motivation, or that we don't need motivation, or we can't rely on willpower, but we're going to go just a bit deeper on that and look at the building blocks of it. So I'd love to jump into it, but I want to check, Hattie, if there's anything else you want to share, want to introduce before we go through that framework.
It's such an interesting thing. We need both. And I think that's a really important thing to highlight here. And it takes time building discipline. It's just like a muscle. It's just like our ligaments. It's just like learning a skill. And the beautiful thing about skills is that we can use them over long term and we can get really good at them. So just like learning how to apply discipline, even using how to use motivation, that's a skill set. And then how to continue it long term, because I know that for a lot of us, motivation can be super fleeting, and we know this, but we want to use it really strategically so we can help bridge motivation to discipline. So how many times have we said or heard someone say, I need to be more disciplined? You know, and then we create this like really intense standard for ourselves that we actually don't know how to reach. And so we say, I need this discipline, and then there's no action and no follow through because we actually haven't got the motivation there. We've just got this really intense thought or statement for ourselves to try and take action on something that's important, but we actually haven't built any skill sets on even like how to take action on that. So we need the why, the what, and the how, and we really want to break that down. So
Like it.
Let's get into it, Michelle.
I like it. Well, First, I might define it. Yeah, I might define it. We got some really amazing people on there. Hello to everyone. Hey, Bianca. We love Bianca. She's done the Neuroscience of Coaching. So let's start with defining discipline, because a lot of the time it's misinterpreted. And when we hear, like I shared before, choose discipline, often what we're actually saying without knowing is just choose willpower. And we know that willpower doesn't have endurance. So the actual definition, the working definition of discipline, is that there's a neurological function, certain parts of the brain are online, that give us more range and more endurance to stay with a habit or stay with a behavior, even when it doesn't feel as good. Willpower is something that's going to allow us to just push through, but it's got a breaking point. It tends to be quite fragile. It only works under certain conditions when there's a certain amount of adrenaline in the system. Whereas discipline is something that can hold us when we feel a little bit flatter. It might be when we're excited. It might be when we're feeling resistant. There's way bigger range. It's not a feeling. It's not even a word. It is certain parts of the brain that are online, which we're going to tap into in just a moment. So discipline is a neurological function that has to be built over time. If you're a beginner at something, it is very unlikely you're going to be able to just choose discipline and tap into it. We have to be able to leverage different elements to be able to build it over, and then it does get easier, right? We are able to choose it over time or come back to it a little bit better. Can you talk about that, Hattie? Maybe the difference between how you noticed yourself at the beginning of your journey, maybe you were more in willpower mode versus now, and then we can go through those 3 elements. What have you noticed?
Gosh, that's a big throwback, Michelle. I guess if I can cast my mind back, essentially I did rely on motivation a lot. I hadn't built the skill sets of discipline through some of the things that were important to me until I learned how to use, I think, even just questions, and we're going to go through this a little bit later, on how to help me see I guess you have to do foresight in like, well, if I chose this thing here, where does it lead me versus if I chose this thing here? And so, there was a motivation to change because I didn't want to stay the same. I didn't want to be who I was at that time. I wanted to be something better. We often say, I want to be the greatest version of me, but we say that out loud with this like imagination of what that might look like, but we don't often know where to start. And when we have this high motivation, sometimes when the motivation's super high, which you've named as like adrenaline in the system, sometimes when there's too much, we get this really heightened experience and then nothing at all. And so I also noticed that would happen to me sometimes. So I would ask myself, like, what can I do now that aligns with the person that I visualize myself to be? And in the beginning, my discipline and my motivation was very on-off, right? I hadn't sequenced it well enough. I hadn't made it habitual, and I was still learning what routine and things like organization and preparation, which are now skill sets, which I still associate as discipline, like I have now. And so, what I'm really grateful for is that I continue to practice, and that's a word that we both love, the skill sets of what self-mastery is, knowing that or learning that failure and failing forward is a big part of that. And so I think one thing that's important in my journey, and it might be able to relate to any people here, is letting go of this thing that had to be perfect and understanding that consistency has layers to it. And I feel like that is something we're going to touch on a little bit later when we talk about the how, because so often people get hold of this high motivation and they might do something with it, but they do too much. And then we go into a little bit of all or nothing. So I think motivation was something that I used a lot and I relied on a lot because I hadn't built the skill or the bridge of discipline just yet. So it was very on-off.
Yeah, and that's such a great segue, Hattie. I love listening to your stories of your journey, but then also how you work with clients and what you pick up with clients as well. You're such a master coach in this way. And I have so much gratitude to be able to bring this lens of neuro. So let's get into the first 2, which is what you're talking about. The first 2 of the 4 elements that are required to build neurological discipline. It may be that you're the client or you're trying to master a skill, or maybe you're working with clients and you want to understand how to help them with it. The first is motivation and the second is precision. So let's break that down. At the beginning of a journey, people tend to be excited about it. We want to be excited about it. That's going to bring adrenaline up. It also brings dopamine up. And those are neurochemicals that we do need in the nervous system to anticipate that if we do something that's different, even something that's a little bit challenging, we're going to get a reward for that, and that might be worth it. And we don't know that yet. There's no guarantees, but the nervous system needs this mix of chemicals to go. Adrenaline, if I stay the same, then that's not going to feel very good. If I change and do something different, I might feel better. So we get those 2 neurochemicals. That's how we would define the why. And motivation, i.e. dopamine. We need that in the room, at least at the start or at intermittent intervals, to get our system to take action on something. Now, it doesn't have endurance. It's not going to hold us over a long period of time, but if it's not there to begin with, the nervous system just doesn't pay attention to the thing that's new. So just debunking that myth from the fitness industry, saying, I know not everyone says this, but we hear it, that motivation isn't needed. Absolutely, it's needed in the right dose, but there's something particular that needs to happen when it's in the room. First, motivation is there, adrenaline and dopamine, and then we need to be able to engage in the action that's aligned with our goal. And this is for a really important point. We were talking before this, Hattie, and you're asking some really cool questions. We were going back and forth, that if we engage in a particular habit or action that gets us closer to the result that we are desiring, that is going to allow our dopamine to stay elevated or to come up even higher. So motivation to start, then we need to engage in a precise action aligned with our goal. And when we notice the outcome is getting us closer to that, we get another spike in motivation. We then engage in a precise action to get us closer to the goal. That then spikes our motivation. We then engage with an action that gets us closer to our goal. So these are the first two. If we are missing one of these or missing both of these, we are not able to build discipline over time because we don't have the neurochemicals, but also we don't have the, in a way, the nervous system doesn't have proof that it's going to be worth the effort. So we need to have this little loop of motivation, precise action, motivation, precise action. It's really hard to do that on our own, but I would love to hear, Hattie, maybe your experience of this working with clients. There's maybe a boost of motivation, but then you play the role. And then in the Neuroscience of Coaching, I'm working with coaches in this way. You play the role of going, how do we use that and direct it to the thing that's going to get the outcome so we can stay in some way excited at times to be able to repeat that loop. How do you notice this in the clients that you coach in Flex?
Yeah, so often we first establish like what the goal is. So I always think what, why, and then how. So those three layers are really useful when we're identifying what the goal is. Okay, let's get some motivation in the system. Why is that important? Let's get an emotional attachment. Let's get that driving emotion, whether it's to move us towards something or move us away from something. They're both really important. Same direction, different experience. We can use both. And then we have the how. Well, how are we going to achieve it? Now, something that we look at is, well, where is the client at right now with their habits and behaviors? Because a big mistake we often see with a lot of people is they go all or nothing, right? 0 to 100. I'm going to overhaul my whole life. Well, guess what? To get a result and to move us in the direction that we want to go in, we don't have to do everything at once. In fact, what we're trying to do is layer habits in actions that we can do consistently and build some evidence about ourselves that we can be disciplined in this one action. And so we can only do so many habits at once, and consistency has layers. So even if we start from 0, we say 3 days a week, we're going to start walking. Or 3 days a week, we're going to get to the gym. Because at the moment, you've been doing 0. We don't have to do 5, even if you've done in the past. We might work towards that later, and that's like a bit of a future pace because everyone likes to know that they're heading in a certain direction. But actually, right now, the starting phase is we're just going to do this. And we're going to check in. And each week, we're going to check in together. I'm going to say, well, how well did we do with this action? And we can start to get that really quick feedback loop, which is really important for embedding that I am doing the right thing. I can follow through with what I say I will do. And those two things, like keep driving that motivation as you named, but they also start to bridge the thing called discipline, which is doing what I said I want to do. And so if I actually find with clients breaking down, like I said, the what do we want to achieve? Great. What does that look like from like a time perspective? Actually, how do we work back? Where's the end goal of our habits, the characters or the values, the things that are important to us? And then where are we now? And we go, well, what's the first layer to that? And then we measure it, we manage it, we reflect, we give quick feedback, and then we keep doing that thing. And that's what I've found being really useful. And so often when clients come in with like a little bit of overwhelm, which can happen when we're doing anything new, and mostly like when the things are exciting, is we start with what can we manage? What can we manage right now? Yep, big tick that off. So that's it. We have a layering process in Flex Method because we want long-term habitual change, not just change right now. So we know that there's layers to that.
Gosh, I love that so much. And you're talking really about that loop in detail, which is the motivation first, which is the spike of dopamine and a little bit of adrenaline, whether it is recognizing that there's a cost of staying the same and we don't want that, or a desire that we're trying to achieve, that's the boost. But then what we're doing, and as you describe coaching there, Hattie, is helping clients, or in my case, helping coaches, direct that energy towards the thing that's going to get the result. And I love the way you said we need to be able to develop proof that we are able to achieve the thing that we want to achieve. And proof, which is the result, a lot of times clients, or in my case, coaches, aren't necessarily able to track or understand what a result is. They might see at the end of the line stepping on stage or having ideal physique or pushing 150 kilos or whatever the goal is, but their nervous system may not understand yet what the increments of progress are. And therefore the gap, the dopamine gap, we would call it, between where they are now and where they want to be, there aren't those little increments to be able to get that boost again. So what you're describing there, Hattie, and you do it so well, is neurologically working with clients to keep that motivation, precise action, motivation, precise action. When we're able to assess what is the result of that, are we on track? You name that people love to see result, but ultimately, neurologically, it's required to be able to build things like discipline and to be able to stay the course. So that relational feedback piece, we're going to talk about that in a moment. I'd love to see if you want to add anything more on the motivation piece, the precise action piece, because we might move to the two other elements, but I don't want to rush it. So anything else you want to share?
I think what's important with motivation is to name it and to ask yourself, what is the first thing I'd like to practice? And following through with that as quickly as you can. There's a saying that I often talk about, and it is motivation without action is just entertainment. And most people entertain the idea of taking action on something. But if you can take one action towards a thing and practice that each day, knowing that not every day has to feel good or each day is easy, then that helps that momentum stay a little bit longer. And then the next piece is trying not to do something too hard too soon or too much too soon. So like we often talk about lowest hanging fruit. Don't underestimate the lowest hanging fruit, and also don't underestimate the invisible wins. So often when we start something new, we're not going to see this big visual change really quickly. And while we might want a visual change, it's actually the invisible progress, which is habits, practicing discipline, practicing resilience or resourcefulness, is actually the thing that's going to allow the physical changes to come a little bit later on. So we want quick feedback loops. We also want to acknowledge like invisible wins, which is today this felt a little bit easier. You know, if we think about when the client wants to squat 100 kilos, and we often talk about this is an example, Michelle, is, well, we can't expect the client to just go straight under the bar. We're going to start with body weight. We're going to start with like getting that neural adaptation first before we actually develop strength. Now that's the same when it comes to just our habits each day, when pre-planning and organization of our food. It's learning to create these little skill sets that in the beginning might feel like a lot, or when we're motivated feel really great, and then at times feel a little bit heavier. But we learn that on the heavy days we're still growing, in the same way that we're still acknowledging and feeling good on the easier days. So that's probably the last piece to that.
Yeah, and I love that. I mean, we could speak about these pieces forever. I know we do anyway, don't we, Hattie? We talk about this stuff all the time. But the invisible wins, I love that concept. When we have motivation and we have precise action, one of the pieces that's often missing is most of the time when people have motivation, they might go so far as to follow through with a particular thing and just enjoy the fact that it's easier, which is really nice. Right? It's nice when harder things feel easier. And at the same time, if we don't have the bookend of really embedding and understanding the benefit and how we feel about ourselves when we follow through, when it's a little bit easier, we miss the mark on being able to leverage that motivational energy. So a bit of a call to action for anyone listening here, if there's a day where you're feeling higher motivation and you follow through on a thing that maybe you normally wouldn't, or something that was really tricky or harder before, please do your system a favor or work with people who can help you with this. At the end of completing that task, take a moment and go, what is that like? How do I feel about myself? What am I carving into my identity about who I am? How am I practicing? This is who I am right now, and really take some time to embed and imprint this in your nervous system. This is the neural bridge. So motivation can feel really good, and we've heard lots of people talk about that, but you can still use it at the end of a task. Make sure you imprint it, work with someone who helps you imprint it. You're describing here, Hattie, in your coaching style, which I think is just amazing, to be able to help clients understand these invisible wins, which is maybe I showed up 3 out of 3 times instead of 2 out of 3 times, or maybe it's I enjoyed it a little bit more. I was a little less resistant than I was yesterday. I talked to someone at the gym when otherwise I might be a little bit shy. This is a part of coaching that allows us to enjoy progress, these tiny little increments that on a neurological level keeps our motivation a bit higher, that allows us to engage in things again, but it also starts to imprint. We tend to enjoy the process a little bit more when we find all of these wins, where otherwise we might not know that they're wins. We might just think at the start that it's the big thing at the end that's the win, but the gap between those two, it's not going to be able to hold us.
Michelle, I just love that you shared that piece, because someone, as you shared that, asked, how do we acknowledge and celebrate, or how do we measure our invisible wins? And I'm like, I think you just nailed that, Michelle. And something that you named was actually, when you have followed through with that action, ask it, like, tune into your system and ask how that felt. What did you notice about yourself? Whether it be a feeling, a thought, maybe even a recognition, a moment you could be proud of, that you can go, I did the right thing. And so often, a really great example of that is when we don't feel like going to the gym and we do it. When we don't feel like going for a walk and we do it. When we don't feel like prepping our meals and we do it. And we overcome this resistance that we have in the system, which often feels so intense. And then we follow through and we're like, that wasn't so bad. Or I did it. And actually I had a great message. And that's like a big win in the system. And that goes, keep doing it. Even if it feels hard, keep doing it. Another way that I like to, share invisible wins with clients is I get them to share with me. What do they notice about their training session? Did something feel easier? Did they feel their abs a little bit more in the session? Did they feel their glutes a little bit more? When they went to do a single leg deadlift, they articulate the movement a little bit easier. That's what I would consider an invisible win. And I get our clients to share with us on our calls, share with us in messages, share with us to the community, hey, I had this win today. And so not only do they get to embed the win in the system, they get to share it with others. And there's this really big support system that happens with acknowledgement, that nice feedback loop of keep practicing, whether you're sharing it with your coach, this is why coaching is so important, but also sharing it with the community who are also in the same practice, but in their own journey.
Perfect segue. You're the segue queen, Hattie. Send me the bill. We're going to talk about the final two pieces in terms of building discipline. We've been doing this a while. I love the ping pong. So the first one is motivation. The second one is precise action, right? We want to use motivation when it's in the room. Often people need support to be able to direct that to the right things. And then we start to be able to identify what the outcome of that is. Invisible wins most often, especially at the start. We need to be able to track and understand our progress to keep that motivation and precise action a little bit higher. So with that, when we've got this really healthy neurological loop, and we've got some support to be able to hardwire this in, the next piece is repetition. We want to do that over and over and over again, as close to each other as possible. What's really interesting in the nervous system is that if you're doing something once a week, and you can talk about this from a development of muscle and strength, Hattie, I'd love to hear from you. Neurology is the same. It's the same nervous system. If we do something once a week, 90% of our learning the same time the next week is completely gone. What we want to do is when we've engaged with something as best we can within 24 hours, within 48 hours, we want to be repeating that. Now, when we say repetition, we mean things like embedding the win. We mean revisiting whatever the practice is. We mean understanding and engaging with our coach to check in how our progress is coming along. So there's different forms of us doing this, but repetition of this motivation and precise action, and then repetition over time as close together as possible. That's the thing that starts to fire and wire things together. You just get more firing over time, like using a muscle. You want to make sure that you get high repetition in that way, and it starts to embed on a neurological level as well. There's one more piece that we're going to add in, but I would love to hear your take on that, Hattie.
Well, I mean, just as you named so beautifully, the same way that we develop discipline in the brain, we develop discipline in the body. The same way we build muscle in the body, we build discipline in the brain. And so I feel like that for people who love training, it's a really easy analogy to remind yourself of if I love building my body in the gym, I can actually build discipline outside of that. And then asking yourself, what are the things that you would like to practice? And I do want to touch a little bit on language, Michelle, because you and I talk about this all the time. I'm a massive fan of the word practice. And for some people, discipline might feel a little bit too much. How can we use language as a tool actually to help us with motivation?
Yep. Yeah, definitely. When we were speaking earlier about the gap between what we expect the win is going to be and where we are now, there are so many speed bumps along the way from a neurological level that we want different strategies, different words, different resources, different tools. And language can be one of the most powerful. The only thing I would say that trumps that is relational feedback, the people who support us, but they, of course, are communicating to us in language. So they go hand in hand. So when we say something like just practicing for the next one, we're just practicing and seeing how we go, just 1% a little bit more, what we're doing is lowering the stakes in the nervous system to help buffer and, in a way, pre-handle and prevent disappointment when our expectations are too high. So what do I mean by this? If a beginner steps in and says, in 6 weeks, I'm going to get my ideal physique, is that objectively possible? Maybe, depending on what their ideal physique is, but it's very unlikely that that's going to happen. So straight off the bat, when we're talking about things like discipline or motivation, or even just staying with things for a long time, we're setting ourselves up for failure. Now, this is unintended. Of course, we just don't know. But one of the things that's really important is, first, we want to set, is the goal objectively possible? Because sometimes it's not. If it is, and this is where we need help with coaching, right? Can we actually do it? Is it physiologically possible? Let's say it is. Then we go, is it possible based on our lifestyle, the time that we have, the skill set that we have at this point? And if that's the case, great. Most of the time, we're maybe under that. So there's a lot of ways that we can use language, like you're speaking to, Hattie, to keep our system from feeling really disappointed and having those big dopamine drops. Practice is one of the ones. When we don't have that mindset or we don't have that frame, we may step in, or clients may step in and go, I expect I'm going to squat 100 kilos in the next period of time. And then just guaranteed, we feel terrible. We feel like we failed. We feel like we haven't hit the mark. And we miss all of those invisible wins, completely miss those invisible wins that allow us to keep that neurological motivation and precise action up. So lowering the stakes to go, we're just practicing, just one more, just enough, not too much, not too soon, just staying with. It helps regulate our disappointment that might drop our dopamine, but it also helps keep our motivation at a level that keeps us engaging over time. Is there anything you want to share on that?
Yeah, I think what's really important as coaches to clients is layering the stages of what their levels of habits are going to ascend to. Just as you named so beautifully there, it's like if someone has an unrealistic expectation of the result in a short amount of time, we end up feeling like we're failing, both the coach and also the client. And so I think it's really important to align expectations with your clients, which is really important, but then create a timeline, because we all like to know that we are moving towards something. We all like to see and know that we are going to be, once I can acknowledge level 1, once I conquer level 1, I can get to level 2 and level 3 and level 4. And so we have this like trajectory of what level 10 might look like. And even if it seems far away, we know that if we achieve this one thing here, it's going to unlock our ability to do the next thing there. And I think that when we gamify our goals as well, that's something that I often use with clients. It's like, let's make this fun, not so rigid, not so strict, but playful, interesting, flexible, but also acknowledge the fact that we do need discipline, and we're going to ride motivation when it's there, but also practice following through when it's not. And so we can develop these skill sets that outside of this little block of window that we're working towards this goal, we still can understand that I have developed skills. And what's really interesting is, Michelle, is sometimes we don't feel like we have the skills till later on. We look back and we're like, oh, I was exercising discipline. And I just want to go do a little piece around like expectations and that language that we talk about when it's like, I have this expectation that I'll be this way. But sometimes when we don't actually have the skill set or acknowledge what we actually need to achieve this goal, which is where coaching comes involved. Coaching is really important there, is that we then have this misalignment of like, actually, am I doing a good job or not? Which is why quick feedback loops from coaching to client is, hey, you are doing a great job. I know it might not feel easy today, but you actually did X, Y, Z. And I feel like, when I do reflections with clients, as a coach, I can say with them, hey, I understand you had this experience, which feels really tough in the system, but you actually did X, Y, Z. And they're like, oh my God, I am in the practice. I'm still here. And I think that's a really important piece.
Yeah, and you're speaking to, so one of the things that we teach in the neuroscience of coaching is supporting coaches in being able to very clearly identify what level a client is at, which often clients may come in and say, I'm level 2 or I'm level 3 because they want to be, right? Everyone wants to be skilled and they want to be capable. And also they may have a frame of what they used to do or how they used to practice when life looked different. It was a different time. They were engaging and focusing on different things, and we can move through levels. This is not bad or good. The most important thing when a coach is engaging with a client, or a client, if you are a client listening to this, is that you're working with a coach who's able to identify where your starting point is right now, not where it used to be, not where we want it to be. That's important in terms of goal setting. But in neuroscience of coaching, we have an algorithm to be able to identify where they're at mentally, emotionally, physically, to ensure that how you're communicating with your clients is appropriate to where they're at. That's absolutely essential, because when we're working with things like dopamine and adrenaline, motivation, precise action, expectation, if we do not get this piece right, we set our clients up for failure. Ultimately, we set our businesses up for failure, because right from the get-go, we're speaking different languages, and every diagnostics, every prescription that we give is going to be totally off the mark, right? There's no chance of winning when we miss that piece. So I love that you talk to that, Hattie. It's so embedded in how you work with clients. There's one more thing that we're going to talk about. I want to see if that's good to transition to the final piece.
Yep.
Amazing. And this is the piece we've been talking about the whole time. It's the thing that wraps it all together. First, we've got motivation that we want to use when it's in the room. Then we align it with precise action, and we start to see that there's proof that it's working. Then we want to repeat that over time as closely together as possible, so we're getting that repetition neurally. And the final piece that allows us to do all of those three things and embed them into what we would call identity-based behaviors, which is very closely related to discipline. That's the prerequisite to discipline, i.e. it feels weird not to go to the gym, or it feels weird not to prep food, or it feels weird not to engage in whatever skill you're practicing. Even if you don't like it on some days, it just feels weird not to do that. That's when we're in identity and discipline territory. That we just kind of do it because it's weird when it's absent. Right? So the piece that is absolutely required, you're describing it the whole time, Hattie, is relational feedback. We are hardwired to understand and learn things from each other. Nobody is impervious to this. Even if there are parts of you who maybe are antisocial or move away from people, or parts that feel like you might not need support from other people, this is in our physiology, it's in our biology, it's the reason the human race exists. So we can leverage this piece. How your coach speaks to you, how you engage with your coach, is the single most important determiner as to whether or not those first three are going to move from starting a habit and moving towards a goal and actually achieving it. So relational feedback is identifying things like invisible wins. A coach, a well-trained coach, a well-skilled coach is going to be able to help you identify those to keep your motivation a little higher and start to hardwire that in. In addition to that, they're going to be able to identify what level you're at to pre-handle and buffer that drop off if our expectations are misaligned. They're going to help you identify what the most important action is just today, not too much, not too soon, not for too long, because they know even when motivation is high right now, it might not be later. We don't want to burn out. We don't want to do too much and have the system drop off. So relational feedback is the element that wraps around all of this, that allows us to leverage all of those pieces without it getting too much, without it spilling over, without it burning out. It's like steady the ship as we're moving through the storm, steady the ship and enjoy when the sails are down and the sun is out, and let's reminisce in that, or let's enjoy the glimmer of that. The coach is the one that helps hold and contain your nervous system while you're going through the ups and downs of this process. How do you do it brilliantly? Talk to us about how you do that with clients. Even just your excitement on wins, right? It's such a regulator, and it's such a wonderful neurological element that you bring to your coaching. Talk to us about it. What do you do?
Well, something that we often do with our clients is we often use a lot of talk about habits around being like part of self-care. So it's something that we want to learn how to practice and learn how to, even like the way in which we label them is not that it's a chore, but it's how do I look after myself, and using questions like, what would I like to practice today, being a choice. Sometimes I think when we have this expectation of what we think we should be doing versus asking ourselves if we would like to, that type of like choice becomes a thing that they get to choose, and it feels like a sense of self-leadership. So something that we talk about is self-leadership and radical responsibility. And then how does that actually transcend into the things that we want to practice and the things that we want to identify with? Because as you named so beautifully, it's that identification piece. It's like, who are we? What do we practice? What are our values? What are the principles that we want to live by? And I think, we work out with our clients, like, what do we want to identify ourselves with? And then what does that look like in terms of practice? And then what does that look like in like actions? And then how often do we reflect and measure it? How often do we want to practice this thing, that we develop some sort of consistency? And I often talk about consistency with layers and have like a consistency threshold. So starting with 3 days a week for 2 weeks, check in. We did that 2 days a week. Can we move it to 4? And so over time, we start to develop a little bit more of that layering process of consistency. And then we get to identify that I am this person that practices this. And I also look at like asking my clients questions around, when we have this moment where we're faced with either going down this road or down this road, what's a great question that we can ask ourselves to be less reactive and choose to be responsive? And a question I often ask is, well, what is the cost? What is the cost of, if I go down this road, what is the cost of that? And if I go down this road, what is the cost of that? And so often we have one that is cost and value. And so I really, again, a great coach helps clients develop the right questions that they can ask themselves in moments where they're in this like tricky point where they don't feel like doing the thing, but they know they want to, but it's the motivation isn't there. They get to then decide whether they get to choose the act of discipline and the act of following through. And so questions create answers, the quality of our questions drive the quality of our answers. So we give our clients, skill sets and tools around, well, how do we ask ourselves the right questions so that we continue to follow through with the habits that we want to practice? And how do we keep developing that or like momentum of that motivation, or developing and bridging that discipline? So language, questions, quick feedback loops, minimum effective dose, creating that little bit of consistency. And then we keep reflecting in and share the wins, but also share the challenges that we're facing so that we can create strategies for the next time that we're facing that particular obstacle. And then we can go practice the thing that we want to practice.
I love that you're speaking to the quality of questions. We know in the nervous system is very well founded, but we also know anecdotally as people out in the world, we do not learn very well when people tell us what to do. We really don't. There's like the visceral feeling of that. Maybe that's just me. I don't really like being told what to do much. It's just like, ooh, it doesn't feel very nice. And also, we may not have had anything modeled that's different. A lot of the time, we're out in the world with the best of intentions, coaches, teachers, I mean, just anybody, right? And without meaning to, we may be directing clients instead of getting curious, and we may be missing the skill set of how to ask the appropriate questions so the client discovers it themselves. When we are able to discover insight ourselves within a relational, safe feedback loop, that is what hardwires in identity, right? When we discover our own sense of things, our own achievement, when we have someone who can facilitate that, the way neurons fire together is completely different than if we're simply, or the perception is that we're just being compliant, we're just following the rules, we're doing it for someone else. So a coach that directs, although there might be moments when there's a lot of trust, and clients are open to it, a coach might just say, do this or do that. But in the beginning stages, when things are new, asking the right questions as a coach, this is one of the things that we teach in the neuroscience of coaching that helps a client discover their own insight, discover their own identity, discover what is most important. And that's what holds. That's where discipline really locks in. So this progressive overload of the muscles, we're talking about progressive overload of the mind. We want to layer this over time. Just like a coach can't go in and do squats for a client, a coach can't direct what's happening with a client's mindset. That client has to practice, be curious, be prompted to be able to develop that themselves.
Michelle, this has been such an amazing conversation. I could listen to you all day. And for those who are super curious as to what Michelle does and would love some help with upskilling their skills as a coach, Michelle, where can people find you?
Neuroscience of Coaching page, which is where we're going from live. You can also reach out to me direct on Instagram if you want to learn a little bit more. I try to get back to all the messages that come through. How about for you, Hattie, if there's someone out there that is wanting your amazing coaching, where do they find you? What do they do? They need your help.
The best place to find me is always my IG. Same thing, Michelle. I do my best to get back to everyone, and we do have coaching spots available within my team at Flex Method. So everyone, if you found today useful, please drop a comment. Like I said, Michelle and I are going to be doing these once a month, and so we are always open to more questions from you guys or particular topics, because we really want to be here to serve you as much as possible. But if you would like further coaching, one-to-one coaching and group coaching, please reach out to us. And Michelle, thank you so much. I always enjoy talking to you, and we're going to wrap this one up. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Hattie. Bye.
Bye.